The town always looked like the kind of place where time forgot to hurry. Cobblestone streets curled lazily between modest brick houses, their chimneys breathing thin trails of smoke that clung to the cool night air. Street lamps hummed faintly, casting warm halos on pavements still damp from the evening drizzle. It was a town that smelled of old newspapers, fading paint, and the quiet certainty that nothing remarkable ever happened here. But that night, as the last shopkeeper turned his key and the distant freight train faded into the hills, an odd sensation lingered, like a page torn from a book mid-sentence. People spoke of the town's history with pride, yet there was always a pause when they reached a certain year, as though a collective fog swept their thoughts aside. Old calendars in the antique store jumped from March to May with no explanation. The librarian, a man with more years behind him than shelves could hold, once said, "Some nights are best left forgotten," before quickly changing the subject. That silence, more than the church bells, more than the ticking clocks, was the heartbeat of this place. And tonight it felt louder. Windows flickered with televisions showing the same static-laced news report. Neighbors waved good night a little too quickly, and somewhere beyond the town's edge, a dog howled at nothing at all. If you had walked those streets, you might have felt it too. That hollow, missing piece of memory pressing softly against the back of your mind, begging to be found. And if I told you that everything you think you know about your own hometown could be rewritten, erased, or replaced without you ever realizing, would you dare to ask what was taken? Have you ever felt like something was missing from your childhood memories? It began as a whisper beneath the static, a faint murmur that should have been nothing more than interference on an old kitchen radio left running past midnight. The town was already asleep, its narrow streets swallowed by fog and the ticking clocks on every mantelpiece moving in perfect innocent rhythm, until they didn't. At 12:03 a.m., the air changed. The radios crackled alive, even the ones unplugged, humming with a low, droning tone followed by a voice that sounded almost human, but not quite. "This is a reminder," it said, the words stretched thin as if traveling across a great distance. "The event will not be remembered." The voice repeated itself, soft, deliberate, before fading into an unmarked frequency no station claimed. And then, like a ripple spreading through water, every clock in town stopped. 7 minutes passed, or perhaps they didn't. Curtains fluttered though no breeze came, headlights of passing cars blinked out for an instant, and those awake later swore they heard footsteps in their attic or the distant chime of bells that never rang. When the clocks resumed, nothing looked different, yet something in the silence felt shifted, like a frame in a film missing from the reel. By morning, no one mentioned it. Radios played their usual jingles, the milkman whistled down the lane, and life went on as if the night had been perfectly ordinary. But if you tuned your dial just right, in that narrow gap between stations, a faint echo lingered, waiting. And if you had heard it, would you have kept listening, or would you have turned the knob and pretended nothing spoke to you at all? The library smelled of paper older than its walls, a mixture of dust and fading ink that clung to the heavy curtains like secrets. It was here, beneath the flicker of a single yellow bulb, that I first saw him, the archivist. His back was curved like a question mark, his fingers stained with the ghosts of 1,000 catalog pages. When I asked about the missing night, his eyes flicked to the clock on the far wall, 12:03, frozen as though it, too, waited for his answer. "Some things," he murmured, "are lost because they were meant to be." His voice had the weight of someone who had carried a truth too long, and with trembling hands he pulled from a drawer a stack of newspapers, each dated the same day, April 14th, yet with headlines that spoke of nothing at all, no events, no names, only blank spaces where the story should have been. Between the folds, strange markings were scrawled in red pencil, cryptic lines connecting articles that didn't exist, arrows pointing to nowhere. "They always come for the record keepers," he whispered, glancing toward the curtained windows as though the night itself might be listening. I felt the room grow colder, the silence heavier. He slid one paper toward me. "If you read between the ink, you'll see the shadow of that night, but be warned, memories are not lost, they are taken." As I reached for the brittle sheet, his hand clamped over mine, thin, trembling but strong. "Do not follow the map it shows you," he said, "because if you do, they'll know you're looking." His eyes darted to the clock again. It hadn't moved. For a moment, neither did I. Outside, the rain began tapping against the glass like impatient fingers. Somewhere in the distance, a radio hummed. And in that hum, I thought I heard the echo of a voice I shouldn't have remembered. The paper felt older than the building it hid within, tucked behind a false drawer in the archivist's desk, edges frayed like burnt lace. I unfolded it slowly, the parchment crackling in protest, releasing a faint, musty scent that reminded me of damp basements and locked trunks never meant to be opened. At first glance, it was a map of the town, familiar in its borders, the river curling like a serpent, the hills drawn with delicate strokes, yet the details were wrong. Streets I had walked my entire life were absent, replaced by names I had never heard, lanes that led into fields now swallowed by houses, and a wide circular clearing labeled the Meridian, though no such place had ever existed on any record. As the folds stretched flat across the desk, the air changed. A faint whisper threaded through the room, as if the parchment itself exhaled a memory. It wasn't a voice, not exactly, more like a breath forming words that refused to fully appear, brushing the back of my neck with cold, invisible fingers. The lamps flickered, and for a heartbeat the lines on the map glowed faintly blue, pulsing like veins beneath thin skin. I traced one crooked path that seemed to cut through the center of the town square, leading to an empty patch where the clock tower now stood, and I swear the walls around me shuddered in response. Somewhere beyond the library, a clock struck once, then fell silent. The archivist's warning gnawed at my mind. Do not follow the map. Yet the ink felt alive, urging me to look deeper, to step into places no longer there. Outside, the rain had stopped. The town was too quiet. And in that quiet, the whisper came again, clearer this time, closer. "We're still here." At first, the stories came in fragments. Half-remembered dreams murmured over black coffee and trembling hands. Mrs. Ellery, who ran the post office for 30 years, swore she woke one night to find her curtains glowing, her clock frozen at 12:03, and a low hum crawling beneath her floorboards like a swarm of insects. Across town, a boy barely 12 said he saw lights dancing in the orchard, spinning in perfect circles, and when he reached to touch them, his fingers passed through empty air that burned cold as ice. Others remembered nothing at all, just the sudden absence, a feeling that something had been rearranged while they slept. And yet, when they spoke, their words began to mirror each other. The same colorless shadows gliding across walls with no bodies to cast them, the same distant rumble like thunder trapped underground, the same scent of ozone hanging in the stillness. I walked those streets with the map still folded in my pocket, and the world felt thinner, as if the skin of the town had been stretched over something it didn't want to show. A man on the corner lit a cigarette and whispered that for 7 minutes, he wasn't himself. He saw his own hands move, but they weren't his. An elderly couple at the diner swore their dog barked at a man-shaped figure standing in their kitchen, though every door was locked and every window nailed shut. These recollections stitched together a tapestry too consistent to be coincidence, yet too fractured to be trusted. The hum, they said, always came first, deep and slow, like the earth taking a breath. Then came the lights. Then nothing. 7 minutes missing from every life, scraped clean like a blackboard before a lesson you were never meant to hear. And the more I listened, the more it felt like those minutes were not just stolen. They were replaced. The reel-to-reel player grown to life like an old animal reluctant to wake, its spools turning with a dry, hesitant whir. The tape had been hidden beneath a floorboard in the library's back room, wrapped in wax paper, its label scratched away by something sharper than a blade. As the magnetic strip hissed through the machine, a low drone seeped into the room, a vibration that seemed to crawl beneath the skin, setting every hair upright. Then came the voices. They were distant, layered, as though recorded underwater. Fragmented syllables in no language I could name, repeating, breaking, then repeating again. Between them, a faint cry, a child's, weak and thin, as if carried by wind from miles away, slipped through the static before vanishing altogether. I leaned closer, straining to catch every sound, when a new pattern emerged, a series of tones, irregular but deliberate, clicking against the hiss like Morse code scrawled in electric pulses. It wasn't until later, when I traced them on paper, that I realized they matched the old power grid of the town, every substation, every line, a map encoded in noise. The archivist's warnings throbbed in the back of my skull, but I couldn't stop listening. The tape warped, screeched, then steadied once more. A man's voice broke through, this one unmistakably human. We said no record. We said no memory. His words trembled, urgent, before being drowned by a sudden surge of static so sharp it rattled the window panes. And then silence. The reel spun empty, the tape cut off mid-breath, as though something had severed it from the inside. I reached to rewind to hear it again, but the machine refused to catch. Only the faint smell of burnt dust lingered, and the feeling that I had just heard something not meant to survive the night. The field stretched out like a wound in the earth, a wide barren scar where no blade of grass dared to grow. It was as if the land itself had been cauterized. Soil melted into rippling panes of blackened glass that caught the pale moonlight and fractured it into cold, wandering shards. Each step I took echoed faintly beneath my boots, hollow, unnatural, like walking on the frozen skin of a lake that had forgotten how to thaw. Locals had whispered of this place, always with a shiver, always with eyes that refused to linger too long. They said nothing grew here, not even weeds, that birds veered away mid-flight as though the air itself warned them off. And now I see why. At the center of the field, faint prints pressed into the fused surface, too shallow to belong to any living thing I knew, too narrow, too precise. They led in a wide arc, then stopped as if whoever, or whatever, had made them simply cease to exist. I crouched beside one and felt the warmth beneath the glass, a lingering pulse in the dead of winter. The map I carried trembled in my hand. The coded lines from the tape pointed here, every arrow, every mark, as though this had always been the heart of what the town was made to forget. I thought of the stories, the lights, the hum, the 7 missing minutes. And standing there in that sterile silence, I understood why denial was easier than memory. Because to remember meant accepting that something greater, colder, and infinitely patient had touched this place. The wind carried no sound, yet in its hush I heard a rhythm, the same slow thrum from the tape, vibrating up through the glass and into my bones. A chill ran through me, not from cold, but from the uncanny sense of being measured, watched, judged. I turned, searching the empty horizon, and for a moment I swore I saw a shimmer at the edge of the field, a ripple of heat in the dead air. It vanished when I blinked, leaving only my reflection in the fractured surface, pale and small beneath an endless, indifferent sky. It began as a flicker on the horizon, a pale pulse that seemed too deliberate to be moonlight and too steady to be distant lightning. The field of glass beneath me caught it, fractured it, and scattered it like restless ghosts across the dark. Then came the hum, deep, resonant, the same one that had haunted the town's whispers, now louder, alive, threading through my ribs and settling behind my teeth like a silent command to stay still. The air grew thick, damp, humming with a pressure that made my skin prickle as though the night itself was breathing against me. Out of the creeping fog, shapes began to stir, not walking, not moving in any way I recognized, but unfolding as though the mist had bones. And then, one of them took form. Tall, thin, wrapped in a shroud of static that blurred its edges like a smudge on old film. I couldn't see its face if it had one, but the outline was human enough to unnerve me, familiar enough to stop my breath. In its hands, or where hands should have been, it carried something small, wrapped in that same flickering distortion, a bundle that hissed softly as if the air rejected its presence. Each step it took left no imprint, yet the glass beneath my feet thrummed in time with its movement. Closer, closer, until the hum became a low chant in my ears, a rhythm that made my heart misstep. I wanted to run. I wanted to speak. But the world had shrunk to that figure and the faint hiss it carried. Behind me, the town slept unaware, clocks ticking as if those 7 minutes had never been stolen. Ahead of me, the figure raised its burden, and for the briefest heartbeat, I saw what lay within the static. A fragment of the town's clock tower, warped, broken, and burning faintly blue from the inside out. The hum stopped. The fog leaned closer. And then, nothing. Dawn bled into the sky like a reluctant confession, pale and thin, washing over the rooftops of a town that had slept through a night it would never remember. The field of glass was empty now. No figure, no hum, no trace of the flickering light that had swallowed the horizon. Only the brittle silence remained, brittle as frost clinging to the edges of a morning that felt wrong in ways I couldn't name. I stood there longer than I should have, the cold chewing at my fingers, until I realized I was clutching something small, jagged, warm. A shard of the field, fused smooth on one side and sharp on the other, pulsing faintly with that same faint blue glow I had seen in the static bundle. I didn't remember picking it up. I didn't remember bending down. Yet there it was, pressed into my palm like a gift or a warning. Back in town, the streets stirred with ordinary life. Shop doors unlocking, buses sighing to their stops, radios murmuring morning weather without static. People waved, smiled, spoke of dreams too mundane to believe, and none of them bore the faintest shadow of what had unfolded while their clocks lay still. They asked about my night. I answered nothing. How could I? The shard felt heavier with every step, as though it carried not just weight, but history, one that had been scraped clean from their minds. Was this protection, I wondered, or manipulation? Had they saved the town from something unspeakable, or hidden the evidence of their own hand? The shard twitched once, faint as a heartbeat, and I slipped it into my coat pocket, feeling the warmth seep through the fabric. Somewhere beyond the edge of dawn, a radio clicked without being touched. The hum did not return, but its echo stayed lodged behind my eyes, waiting for nightfall. The town sleeps, or at least it pretends to. Windows are shuttered not because of the cold, but because of the possibility that sound, that low, impossible hum that creeps beneath the doors at 3:17 a.m., the same time clocks pause for a heartbeat too long. No one speaks of it anymore, not in public, not even in whispers. But in the hollow silence between seconds, everyone waits. The protagonist lies awake, the shard of fused glass hidden in a drawer beside the bed. It doesn't glow. It doesn't hum. But sometimes, when the night bends a certain way, it feels warmer than the rest of the world, as if remembering something the town has agreed to forget. There are nights when the hum returns, faint as a sigh behind the walls. Curtains tremble. Dogs do not bark. Birds do not stir. It is as if the town itself is holding its breath. Some nights, the protagonist thinks of going outside, stepping onto that blackened field where the earth once turned to glass. But the warning of the archivist lingers. Do not follow what you cannot remember. Children have stopped asking questions. Their parents stopped before them. The map with no roads was burned. The tape has disappeared again, as if it never existed. And yet, every so often, a light flickers in the horizon. Not the orange of dawn, not the silver of the moon, but something else entirely, something that feels like being watched. What unsettles the protagonist most is not the silence of the town. It's the compliance. No one investigates. No one demands answers. The mayor calls it a power surge. The police call it nothing. People call it fate. Only the protagonist keeps the nights recorded, scratching times and half-remembered shadows into the margins of old newspapers, hoping the ink will anchor them when memory fails. One night, near the season's first frost, the hum swelled again. This time, it pressed against the protagonist's skull like a memory trying to crawl back in. For a moment, the clock on the wall froze to 11, then lurched forward as if the second hand had been caught and released. The protagonist stood at the window, hand trembling over the curtain. Outside, the street was empty. Or maybe it wasn't. The longer they stared, the more the edges of the world seemed to waver, as if the town itself were a photograph being erased from its corners inward. Would they come again? Were they already here? Or had they never left at all? The shard in the drawer pulsed once, faintly, then cooled. In that moment, the protagonist understood what the archivist meant. Forgetting is not always a mercy, it's a choice. One the town had made long before the missing night. The hum faded, leaving only silence in its place. Tonight, if your clock stops, will you remember? Or will they make you forget too?